Hello, my name is Jeremy Woodruff, and I'm joining you from the Bao Art uh, concert series. Um, Today, we're going to be premiering a work of mine which is called Cellphone Computer Choir Construction 1. And this piece uh, represents a lot of ideas that came out of sound art and experimental music. I'm professor of composition and music theory at Istanbul Technical University, Miam. And I'll introduce my two colleagues who are performing with me today. First of all, Amy Salzgiver, could you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, hello everybody, listeners. My name's Amy Salzgiver. I'm percussion faculty at Istanbul Technical University, Miam. I'm also part of Borusan Orchestra and his Arfen Ensemble. Nice to see you tonight. Enjoy the show.
And Aisha, could you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, my microphone near my cello, so I'm speaking from here. I'm Zeynep Ayşe Tipoğlu. I'm also a doctoral student at MIAM in the performance department. It is so nice to be here.
Uh, so, um, and joining us is also a choir, so-called choir, who are activating sounds from SoundCloud and Spotify, who are operating in the background and interacting with the performers in a separate room. And the reason that they're in a parallel meeting and also being streamed in a parallel stream, which can be viewed at my artist page, which is facebook.com/Jeremy Woodruff Music is because this is a way to experiment with the format of the live streaming event. So um, if I can actually just introduce a little bit the concepts of experimental music and sound art that inspired me, then I hope that I can help you understand the music that you'll hear next. So there's a musician and a composer named John Cage, who I was lucky enough to meet. He's probably best known as the famous author of the silent piece, which is a piece where a musician comes on stage and plays 4 minutes and 33 seconds of silence. And this was also regarded as one of the first pieces of sound art. And the distinguishing feature of sound art is it uses sound as a material, and it uses the sociality of sound as a material, and it also explores the various formats that sound uses, material and the media formats that sound uses. And when I was 18, I was lucky enough to meet John Cage. He came to do the Norton lectures at Harvard University. And my composition teacher at that time was an assistant at Harvard University, and he invited me to perform a piece called Imaginary Landscapes Number 4 for the composer. Imaginary Landscapes Number 4 is a piece for 4 radios where there's 8 performers. 4 players tune the volume, and 4 players tune the channel of the radios. I remember performing this piece, and it had a deep influence on me, and it changed my perception about what is music and also how we perceive sound in an aesthetic way. And since that time, I've been interested in composing music that also experiments with the medium of sound, and to compose music that asks questions about how we perceive sound and music together, and how we also understand it and perceive it when we're apart. And the last few months have presented enormous challenges, of course, to musicians and artists alike, but especially the act of playing together has been interrupted all over the world. And we see that there have been many concerts that have been streamed in this fashion. In fact, like by going live on a page and playing over a conferencing software, mostly Zoom, and you even see choirs singing together on Zoom these days. But there's always the feeling that there's something slightly missing. In other words, it's a replica of a concert scenario which actually can't exist at the moment. And so I took this chance on this series to experiment with the format and experiment with the idea of what a concert in the online format can be. And also use the ways that the sounds are disjointed and not connected as a way of exploring the format of streaming. So because we know we actually will never be playing together here in a literal way because of the time displacement and the interruption, I decided to use the artifacts of the format itself, in other words, the delays and the echoes, to see what's possible with kind of, like a radical kind of channel surfing that can happen using multiple players and a choir of people on their computers, all playing different internet applications at the same time, together with the performers. So this is something that would only be possible, through this format. And what I thought would be interesting is, for example, we have 3 different Spotify accounts, and each performer is listening to a different one. And there's different members of the choir operating each different Spotify account. And they can change our channel. In other words, they can change the music that us performers are playing to remotely. So they change our sound environment from where they are, and it's a way of interacting on a live stream rather than just emulating a concert format, which we're all longing to have, but can't actually completely do at the moment in its full form. And the other thing that we're doing is that the choir has access to a SoundCloud page, and they're triggering files there that then are accumulated in their parallel meeting. So there's one meeting where the performers are being heard. That's the meeting that you're currently watching and hearing. And there's a parallel meeting which is being streamed on my artist page and Jeremy Woodruff Music at Facebook. And you could watch those 2 streams at the same time and have 2 perspectives on the sound, which you could balance yourself. And that's part of the concept of the piece. And part of the concept of the piece is also that everyone has their own sound experience in their own environment, which is very different. And that's actually what I want. So rather than pretending that we're together, I've set up an environment where everyone can have their own experience while interacting with everyone else. And this actually comes back to the ideas of John Cage. One of the first concerts that he did with Merce Cunningham, who was a lifelong partner and collaborator, who's the Merce Cunningham dance company in New York. One of the first concerts that he did was he had the audience facing all in different directions in the concert hall so that they all got different perspectives of what was going on in the action. And he had this idea of everyone has their own perspective of the music, and instead of trying to consolidate them into one perspective, that he would use this way of everyone having a different perspective and getting kind of a different way of looking at the sound or hearing the sound. And that's also one of the facets of sound art, is that, you know, time changes our perception, and every time that we hear something from a different direction, it changes our perception. And the spatialization of audio is one of the topics of sound art. So everyone who's participating in this performance in the choir, they have their own experience of the piece, and that's actually part of the entire idea. And also my aesthetic in the piece is actually one that's taken from John Cage as well. It's he was very interested in something he called chance procedures, and the idea was that he would enable the piece to sort of form itself without directing it in a particular way, so that it could tell him some things. In other words, that he could discover things by putting different possibilities in contact with each other and finding out what would happen. And so instead of directing this piece and deciding everything that happens in this piece, I allow all of the choir members and the performers to make certain choices. For example, what Spotify track they want to play, or what SoundCloud track they want to play. And I've also generated the form of this piece from chance procedures, so that the form wasn't actually designed by me, but happens very kind of spontaneously. It happened by actually developing a randomized chart on Microsoft Excel. At any rate, what this allows me is to find out what happens, you know, in a way, without trying to direct this. What happens when you put all these elements together? What happens when you have two streams at the same time going out and different perspectives being heard? What happens when you allow people to co-create an artwork? The interesting thing for me, though, my difference with John Cage is his idea was that through doing this, that it would teach you a different way of listening. But I'm absolutely sure that your way of listening is fantastic, and I don't think that I have to teach you a new way of listening. Instead, I'm hoping that through letting everyone exert their influence on this piece, that I'll myself learn how to listen to this process and to engage, you know, in a more interesting way with the format of the online concert, not as an adaptation of a live concert, but for the possibilities that an online concert offers, in terms of extending the possibilities of what a concert can be. So that was the basic idea, and you know, so for that reason, I'm not so worried about the aesthetic of the piece. I let lots of different, various kinds of music come in. I allow lots of different styles of music to enter, and that that encounter is also something that I welcome, because the idea is to pay attention more to the material of the music and the quality of the social interaction that happens in it. But anyway, I hope that you'll enjoy the music that we're doing and the experiment that we're trying today. And so we're all being coordinated via a timer, which is being shown on the parallel stream. And I'll now allow my assistant, Danny Fratina, to take over, and he'll be directing the choir. So Danny, whenever you're ready. Thanks. Great. Thank you, choir. Thank you, performers. That was very exciting. I'm looking forward very much to seeing the live replay of that performance. I'm wondering now if it's possible for someone to see any questions that might be posted under the live stream. I am not able to see them myself, so I will actually, instead of opening questions to the Facebook audience, I'll invite the choir to give their impressions and ask their questions about how I came up with this piece, or any other question that you might have about the piece or the process, or any other comments that you'd like to give. And please, if you have a question, do introduce yourself first. And at this point, you may need to mute your computer and unmute your cell phone in order to be heard on the live stream. So, I mean, I can talk more about the history of sound art and this approach to composition. If no one has some questions, maybe I'm wondering if anyone can see any questions that might be coming up on the Facebook page.
There are no questions so far to be seen on the Facebook page.
Okay, in that case, what I'd like to do is just to mention again one more time that this live stream can be seen in stereo, as it were. You can hear both the perspective of the cell phone and computer choir on my artist Facebook page, Jeremy Woodruff Music, facebook.com/Jeremy Woodruff Music / and that way you'll hear, because there's a lot of sound, and when a whole choir plays together with an ensemble, especially with electronic sounds, what happens is, unfortunately, things get covered up. And so in order to have a multi-layered sound and a multi-perspective, multi-layered perspective on sound, I wanted to have 4 channels. Then what's happening is that the choir is hearing the performers on their cell phones on one Zoom meeting, and the performers are hearing the choir's SoundCloud contributions on their cell phones. So there's 2 parallel meetings, and this way it's possible to hear the computer sounds of the SoundCloud very clearly on 2 channels, and then the performers very clearly on the other 2 channels, so that if you listen to both these streams simultaneously, you can adjust it to your liking, and you can hear everything as it would be, together. The fact that these different styles of music and different sounds are triggered unexpectedly cause the performers to react to them. And so, in fact, the choir is deciding the accompaniment sort of at all times, the background electronic sounds and the accompaniment to the performers that's shaping their improvisation. And of course, there's solo parts where only the choir is playing, and where only the ensemble or different specific members of the trio are playing. This is basically a kind of piece which would be then put together as a video installation with multi-channel sound. I'm really taking this concept from the history of the plastic arts, which explores and goes around the medium that one is using. So, of course, usually someone would think, why would you have Zoom, Spotify, SoundCloud, and then we also have Dropbox so that everyone can share sounds and upload them from their computers. The reason is that I'm trying to explore different ways and innovate different ways that people can be together on the internet with the services that everybody knows, and to try to kind of come up with interesting and new combinations. And I feel glad about having this chance to do that. What I'd like to do is post the link for the choir participants. I would like to post that on my Facebook page. So if you're watching this this live stream now, you can go to my artist page, which is facebook.com/Jeremy Woodruff Music /, and you can find the Zoom link to join the choir. And I'll give you explicit descriptions, explicit directions once you've joined, how you should participate. Next to that post, I'm also going to post a SoundCloud page, which has 17 tracks that I composed. And once you've joined the meeting, you can use any of the sounds that are on this SoundCloud link to contribute to the choir through that meeting. So I'm going to put that up next. There's the, okay. And I hope maybe if you go to my artist page, facebook.com/Jeremy Woodruff Music /, you'll see that I've posted the Zoom meeting link to participate with the choir, and thereafter the SoundCloud link for the sounds that you can use in the choir. And then we'll try the piece again. So Danny, I don't know, has anyone else asked to be admitted?
Not yet, but I'm keeping an eye on it.
Mm. And again, I would just see if there's any other questions or any comments that the choir wants to contribute. There was one of the things I think of is actually a lot of the students of John Cage were in a group called Fluxus, and some of these members went on to do all sorts of media art. For example, Naim June Pike is one of the foremost and most innovative video artists of the 20th century, and he took a lot of Cage's ideas having to do with indeterminacy and using ambient sounds of the environment, and use them in new ways in the medium of video. So in this tradition, I'm trying to use the medium of the internet to to explore other possibilities that otherwise wouldn't be available to us. Okay, I think that we.
Are there any other names that one could or should mention after John Cage who continued this way of making music or working with sounds?
Well, for example, there was John Cage worked with a favorite and a famous pianist named David Tudor, who premiered his sonatas and interludes and some of the pieces where he first used chance operations. And this pianist also went on to be one of the innovating sound artists by using home hand-built electronics as compositions and as sound sculptures. And in fact, one of his major works, his sort of breakthrough sound art work, Rainforest, is going to be up in one of its latest incarnations, which is put together by John Driscoll and some other sound artists who worked together with him at the Arter Space for Art. And that of course was unfortunately postponed, but will be remounted, I hope, in the fall. And there'll be an open question and answer session to talk with David Tudor there about his ideas and how he came up with this piece. But basically what he did was he had all sorts of everyday objects. And he also did this in a children's playground where he put piezo microphones, so pickup microphones on all sorts of objects. And when people touched them and played with them and walked around them, then it made all sorts of resonant sounds. And so it was sort of like the sounds of everyday life transposed into music, which was, one of kind of Cage's ideas, one of his main theses about composing music, that all sound is music in some way. Now, I don't believe that all sound is music. For example, like if your grandfather is snoring in the living room, I don't think that, he would really like it if you told him that was music. I have a different viewpoint on it. But it's, like an interesting philosophical point which had a lot of consequences in the 20th century. There's some other, of course, there's countless names, but there's a whole group of composers now who deal with silence and radical silences and radical kind of ways of dealing with chants in music and with pastiche and collage of various types of materials. For very intensely silent music, there's a group, for example, like Wandelweiser, who have been doing, which I was just teaching about in my class today, who have just a few notes, for example, in a span of time of a few minutes in their compositions. And they've been very influential in the last 30 years. Or you have someone who's constantly asking questions about the nature of sound and the sociality of sound, like an artist like Peter Ablinger, for example, who has the voice be imitated very, very carefully by a computer transcription that is then put onto a mechanical piano, and so that the voice is exactly imitated by the player piano, and what you get is really very astonishing. To other colleagues of mine, such as a writer by the name of Brandon LaBelle, for example, who wrote a book among a number of books called Background Noise, Perspectives on Sound Art. And he goes and explores, for example, the way that people listen and the way that people move together, and the way they come together in a community as a kind of sound in itself, and how does that change our perception of sound when we're together or when we're apart. And I would put this piece in that same kind of category of social sound art, where I'm asking the question of, even while we're apart, how are the multiple ways that we can be together using the tools that are available to us online, or how can we explore an interactive process through the tools that are online that might be more interactive than just a streaming concert, which is going unidirectionally, one direction from performer to player. So I probably talk too much, and I don't know if I actually.
No, I actually have one more question. Is there any overlapping between sound art and what we call contemporary music, or is this something that you briefly could describe,
Yeah.
maybe the difference for
Yeah.
us who are not so much involved in music?
Yeah. So early on in experimental music, as I mentioned, like for example, John Cage wrote the famous Silent Piece. There's also composers who thought about the idea that John Cage was espousing and used them in different ways. So John Cage's idea was that you should, in using chance procedures, he was saying that he was allowing nature to occur in his pieces. And there was one composer named Alvin Lucier who taught for many, many years at Wesleyan University, who would actually amplify sound processes that are happening in the natural world. For example, he did a piece called Music for Solo Performer, which was created in 1965, where the performer, which was him at first, would put sensors on their scalp and transpose the brain waves into the audible spectrum, so that what you would be listening to is actually the sound of the performer's brain waves. And so actually, in that tradition, what we're hearing in this case is the result of a web of connections online, which are all interacting in unpredictable ways. John Cage flipped coins to come up with his chance procedures. But at some point I realized, the most unpredictable thing and the most chance procedures that I can think of is the actual ideas and actions of other human beings. There's absolutely no way you can predict or control what other people are doing. And so for me, those are the most interesting chance procedures that I can imagine. And I very much like the idea of allowing other people to teach me how to listen rather than me teaching everybody a new way of listening. So Alvin Lucier is one, and there was also a woman composer named Pauline Oliveros who taught at Rensselaer Technical Institute, who sadly passed away a few years ago, who developed something called deep listening. And the thing is, when experimental music, contemporary music, made a transition from focusing on controlling the sound to thinking about how the sound is perceived and how the process of listening changes through conceptual ways, then it made a leap into being a kind of conceptual art. And there's all sorts of strands of history to that. So minimalism is also involved in that story. So composers like Philip Glass and Steve Reich were there at the very beginning and were involved in this process of experimentation, where the focus was placed on the perception rather than the production of sound as such. And there was like just in the conceptual art realm, in the abstract contemporary art realm, where conceptual art is something where you set up a process, for example, and the texture in the process is more interesting in itself in certain ways, or is the kind of narrative of the piece. The same thing happened when the emphasis was put on the perception of sound rather than necessarily any kind of way of steering the product in a way that was good or superior. Instead, when it became like a kind of process, so that the process would spin itself out, and in that way you would learn about the concept from how the process acts, rather than imposing set ideas of an aesthetic on the work. And so that's the crossover point where contemporary music, I would say, turns into a kind of sound art, which is really dealing with the medium of sound and with the medium of the relations around and the social relations around sound and music. So I don't know. Do we have time to play through this piece one more time? What do you think? Or should yeah? Okay, good. Yeah, this will be a good illustration to show you how each time this piece is very dependent on the actions and the spontaneous actions of the choir. So each time they make different decisions, and that causes the performers to relate to each other in different ways. Um, so thank you very much for joining us, and we'll perform the last version of Cellphone Computer Choir Construction 1.
And Jeremy, we have one person who's joined.
Oh, great. Okay, very nice. So for that person, I should tell you to please, yeah. So just open the sound cloud page that I gave you, and you can use your computer speakers to contribute to the choir sound. Okay. Danny, whenever you're ready, we'll let you start us off. Oh wait, we're waiting for Amy. 1 second. Okay.
So sorry, my cat knocked down
Ready?
the camera.
Okay.
Talking about chance procedures. Right. Okay. So yeah, thank you very much. That was a great pleasure and a really a fantastic new experience for me, and I hope for some others. And the two simultaneous streams will be available on the Bachar University Facebook page, as well as my own Jeremy Woodruff artist page. And you can trigger them and hear them both at the same time, so that you can get the full experience of this sound art work and this experimental piece that I put together for the occasion of this for this live streaming event. And so I would very much like to thank Jochen Pro for organizing this series. And I would very much like to thank Bauart and Bachar University for inviting me. It's been a great honor to be here. And thank you, Aisha, and thank you, Amy, very much. And I wish the new Bau Conservatory much luck and success on its opening. That's really fantastic news for Istanbul, in my estimation. So, and thank you also, especially to my assistant, Danny Fratina, for leading the choir today. I would say it also very rising to the occasion at very short notice to take charge of that job. So thank you all very much, and I look forward to seeing you again actually next time, when I'll be inviting an ensemble with players from New York, the UK, and Chennai, India, and of course I am coming to you from Berlin at the moment, to also show how collaborative experimental processes of exploring online performance can bring us together in a different way. So thank you very much, and have a good evening.